Chapter 25. Wei Ran, the only one in her different space. A would go into the space forest every few days to have a look, and she didn't have much time. For fear of Muzi's burden, it usually only lasted an hour. Today she found a large fruit field in it because there is only sunlight and rain in the forest, so it is like a big greenhouse with fruits of all seasons. She picked apples, watermelons, bananas, and other fruits and kept them fresh in the storage space, so that she can take them directly when she wants to eat. Wei Ran brought out some cherries, a watermelon, a bag of red fruits, a big pheasant twice the size of a normal pheasant, and some wild mushrooms. The big pheasant in her hand was wild and powerful, and it kept thumping and trying to break free, so she hurriedly carried it downstairs. Mu Zicheng, Chen Wei, and Gu Ming were talking in the living room. She ran over carrying the heavy pheasant. Chen Wei was listening to Mu Zicheng's words carefully, nodding his head from time to time, when suddenly a big feathered thing piled up between them, still clucking. Chen Wei saw the living animal in front of him in a daze and asked with great uncertainty, "Is this a pheasant? It's alive?" Gu Ming was also surprised at the big pheasant in Wei Ran's hand. Since the end of the world, it has been a long time since they saw live poultry, and even the supplies they purchased before were only frozen meat. Wei Ran looked at Chen Wei wonderingly, "Isn't this still screaming? Of course it's alive." Then she slightly raised the other hand, holding a bag full of things, the red fruit for you, by the way, as well as cherries and watermelon. Her fair little hand was marked with an obvious red smear. Mu Zicheng frowned and immediately took the bag from her hand and threw the big pheasant to Chen Wei. "Take it, it's dealt with." Then she took out the wet tissue placed on the tea table and wiped her little hands carefully. Chen Wei caught the pheasant in a daze, but still didn't turn his head. "No, why are there still live poultry and these fresh fruits?" Jiang Nanfeng also came in from outside when he heard the rooster crowing, and stunned, he pointed to the pheasant. "This is a pheasant. But isn't the pheasant too big?" Before it was a strange red fruit, but now it was the energy water that instantly restores the power, and finally it could suddenly appear living creatures and seasonal fresh fruit. They can also understand the storage of materials, which may be some kind of special item assistance. But they are puzzled by living creatures, and fresh food does not exist in the last days. All three are dumbfounded. Because living leisurely these days is not like the end of the world, but like a retirement adventure trip. Mu Zicheng was silent for a while and said directly, "This is the material that Ran took out from her different space. There are living creatures, food, herbs, water sources, etc., including the special red fruit that can increase the power, which also came out of her." The three of them couldn't believe it. "Isn't that another world?" Jiang Nanfeng swallowed hard and remembered another thing. "But doesn't Xiao Ran have supernatural powers?" Wei Ran didn't answer. Her eyes were half downcast to cover up her emotions. Although she probably knew how this different space appeared, it was impossible for her to tell them about the past life. She didn't want to talk about it, and she didn't want to recall it. Mu Zicheng threw the dirty wet tissue into the trash can. His eyes turned slightly, and after a moment of silence he said, "That's not a supernatural power, it's only hers." Wei Ran shuddered when she heard Mu Zicheng's words. It was cold, the blood on his face faded. He looked at Mu Zicheng tensely, his wide eyes were full of shock and fear. "Brother, he knows? Will he hate her then? Will you stop talking to her?" Mu Zicheng felt Wei Ran's strong uneasiness. He held her slender shoulders and pressed them into his warm arms to warm them up. Then he grabbed Wei Ran's cold hands and stroked her nervousness and anxiety. After guessing that Wei Ran's different space was built by her with powerful ideas, he vaguely felt that she was hiding something. Recalling that she used dreams to tell every important event of the last days clearly, but only about her and him in the later dreams, Wei Ran never mentioned it. Think about her sudden change before and all the things after that. He has estimated an incredible possibility. No, it's not possible, it's certain. Mu Zicheng has not used his consciousness to explore Wei Ran so far. He used to be afraid of seeing some pictures of her and others, but now he doesn't need it. Today's mutual love makes two people trust each other without reservation. Wei Ran didn't want to face the past, so she followed her. The most important thing is to be by each other's side now. Mu Zicheng turned his indifferent eyes to the three of them, and briefly said as for why Ran has this different space. There is no answer. The three of them nodded thoughtfully. Wei Ran noticed that Chen Wei opened his mouth a few times, as if he had something to say, and she was nervous about how she would answer if they asked her. The living room was silent for a while. Chen Wei finally got the words out of his mouth. I see. Let's use this pheasant to make soup. There are still some wild scorpions here, and add a piece of ginseng that Xiao Ran brought last time to make a tonic soup. The other two go along with it. Chen Wei took the ingredients, got up and walked to the kitchen with the chicken. Jiang Nanfeng dragged Gu Ming and followed Chen Wei to ask for help. The three of them knew that even though they had this different space, for them, they would no longer have to worry about future supplies in the last days. But for Wei Ran, it was a great danger. If other people know that she will become the primary target of everyone's competition, it will be a disaster for Wei Ran. No wonder Mu Zicheng was unwilling to say more before, not because he didn't trust them, but because the less people knew about it, the safer Wei Ran would be. Thinking of this, the three of them immediately shut up and stopped asking anything about this different space. Wei Ran was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that everyone would just disperse without asking too much about the different space. In Mu Zicheng's arms, she raised her head towards Mu Zicheng's face, and saw Mu Zicheng staring down at her with a tender face. She opened her mouth and was about to say something, but Mu Zicheng stopped her delicate lips with his knuckles and clean fingers. Sheesh. You don't have to say it if you don't want to, my Ran. She blushed suddenly. She squeezed her eyes, hugged Mu Zicheng's thin and strong waist tightly, let go of her body completely, buried her head in his warm and firm arms and nodded gently. The three people's daily life sounded from the kitchen again. Gu Ming, I told you to kill the chicken, not to chop off the chicken head. It's so clean and neat. No, this knife edge is very neat and beautiful. Get the two of you out of the kitchen. In the deep mountains, boom bursts seemed to be the sound of footsteps, shaking through the valley. Immediately afterwards, in the dark night in the mountain forest, groups of black-clad, 2-meter-high wrecks like tyrannosaurs, but also giant lizards appeared, with gaping bloody mouths filled with rows of sharp teeth. They ran quickly towards the mountain village in the distance. Suddenly, a group of zombies appeared in front of them and came towards the alien. For the alien, no matter whether it was human, animal or zombie, they were all food. So when they saw prey in front of them, they immediately rushed to the group of zombies to bite and scratch them to pieces. Hundreds of zombies turned into pieces of flesh and fell into the bloody mouth of the alien. This is the alien that is more terrifying than zombies. Chapter 26. You are my. Wei Ran moved all the instruments and equipment in Mu Zicheng's mother's laboratory directly into the storage space. In this way, no matter where she goes in the future, she can directly make medicines in the space, and if there is anything missing during the production process, she can go directly to the forest to replenish. She has improved the power recovery water in the past few days, although it still can only recover half of it, but every time the power is almost exhausted, as long as she drinks the energy water, it will be recovered infinitely. After finishing busy work in the space, it was already night. At this time, the solar lights that are collected in the courtyard during the day are turned on in the room, so it makes no difference to them if the power is turned off. Seeing Mu Zicheng standing upright on the balcony of the room, exuding a cold breath, and looking at the night in the distance, it seems that there is something there. She walked over and hugged his thin waist from behind, stretched out her head and glanced in the direction he was looking at, but saw nothing. Then he looked up at Mu Zicheng's strong jaw again, and asked puzzledly, "What's wrong?" Mu Zicheng restrained his serious expression, lifted the little wild cat behind him into his arms, and looked at the pleasing man with low eyebrows. Wei Ran couldn't help but lowered her head and kissed her tender cheek again. Ran, we will be leaving soon," he whispered in Wei Ran's ear affectionately. Wei Ran paused for a moment. She knew exactly what Mu Zicheng meant. The alien had appeared, and it would come here soon. Fortunately, these days she has almost prepared everything that should be prepared. There are also 3 Jiangnan Fangs who are killing zombies in groups these days, and their experience points are also doubled. After eating the red fruit this time, the ability level not only reached level 50, but also broke through 2 barriers in a row, directly reaching level 70. And Mu Zicheng has already passed level 200, but only he knows how much, because the higher the level of the supernatural being, the better he can hide his strength. Just leaving home. This is the place where she lived for 2 lifetimes. There are too many memories. The previous life was too hasty to have time to think about it, but now the thoughts of reluctance come to my heart. Mu Zicheng looked down at her with her head down and kept silent, so he knew what she was thinking, and seemed to pat her on the back to comfort her. Gently and softly said love words, Ran, as long as we are together, no matter where we go, we are home. Say less. She raised her head to stare at Mu Zicheng, resting her chin on his chest, with 2 dimples on her lips. I just feel a little reluctant. I can go anywhere, as long as my brother is by my side. Mu Zicheng squeezed, putting down her tall nose. She said forcefully, you can only be by my side. Wei Ran thought that Mu Zicheng had always been her first in these 2 lifetimes, and had never changed a bit. Her heart was so soft that she stood on tiptoe and kissed Mu Zicheng's thin lips. Just one moment, I want to leave. But Mu Zicheng hugged her tightly into his arms, pressed her on the back of her tender neck, and deepened the kiss wantonly. Wei Ran was originally wrapping her hands around Mu Zicheng's strong waist and clutching his coat tightly, but her little hand was gradually moving along his tight abdominal muscles, stopping and stroking. Wei Ran was a little disturbed by the kiss, and a broken moan escaped from her mouth. It was this sound that caused Mu Zicheng to completely shatter his sanity, and his hot and rough fingers slipped into the tail of her clothes. He didn't want to leave her delicate lips, so he directly carried her to the room like that, and used his consciousness to control the solar lamp to the darkest. Throw her on the soft bedding, and then cover her. The corners of Wei Ran's eyes were blushing, and she bit her lower lip slightly. Mu Zicheng exhaled warm breath in her ears and said in a very hoarse and deep voice, Ran is so beautiful. The fiery Mu Zicheng, the soft Wei Ran. The night is long. Even the moon outside the window shyly hides in the thick clouds. The early morning light spilled into a room full of messy and strewn clothes on the floor. Wei Ran, who was still awake, moved her sore body slightly. The strong arms on the soft waist hugged her tightly, so that there was no gap between her graceful back and his hard and strong arms, and warm kisses fell on her smooth and slender shoulders. Wei Ran was woken up by his kiss like this, remembering that she had quarreled with Mu Zicheng until almost dawn last night. She shyly hid her face under the soft quilt and refused to come out. Mu Zicheng looked at her blush-covered body, laughed in a low voice with joy, bit her ear lightly, and murmured, Ran is completely mine. He raised his head, grabbed her tender lips and rubbed them together, continuing the madness of last night. After Wei Ran was tortured by Mu Zicheng, she couldn't get up until noon. She turned a few times on the bed and felt refreshed, which must have been cleaned up by him carefully. Lifting off the quilt, Wei Ran walked into the bathroom with her still sore waist, only to find that Mu Zicheng had left many marks on her neck. It seemed that Mu Zicheng's clean breath was still tainted on her body. She stroked these traces, and Mu Zicheng's domineering and rough side flashed again, and her fair little face was flushed again. Fortunately, it's winter now, and Wei Ran wore a turtleneck sweater to cover up the marks. When she walked to the first floor, she saw Mu Zicheng and Gu Ming talking about aliens. When Mu Zicheng turned his head and saw her, he got up and walked towards her, took her hand and said softly, "Are you feeling unwell?" Wei Ran lightly shook her blushing face. "No." Mu Zicheng stroked the little hair on her cheek. "I was thinking of going up to see if you're awake. Just in time for lunch." Then he took her to the dining room and sat down. Gu Ming and the other 3 also sat down. Mu Zicheng served her a bowl of rice, put some vegetables on her plate and served it again. a bowl of soup was placed in Wei Ran's hand. Men continued what they had just said in the living room. Mu Zicheng said slowly, "We will go to the factory over the industrial park in a few days to take away the equipment." Wei Ran paused with the hand holding the soup spoon and turned slightly to Mu Zicheng. They did not prepare production equipment and these machines and the preparation materials before the end of the world. Although they will collect some equipment these days, but that is just, by the way, a small amount. She has always known that Mu Zicheng is powerful, but she still can't help but be amazed. Even in this apocalyptic situation, Mu Zicheng is farther than anyone thinks. These devices are useless now, but when society calms down in the future finally, the production equipment is the first thing to be robbed. Because the first step in rebuilding society is production. No one will take the production equipment. It should belong to us all over there, but the alien is very close to our side, so everything will be done in the future. Be careful. The three nodded sternly. Chapter 27. For several days in the industrial park, Mu Zicheng and his party went to the industrial park to collect production equipment. The industrial park is a special area where the government gathered various factories to improve management in order to meet the needs of development. This place used to be the busiest place in industry, but now it is extremely empty because of the loneliness. Mu Zicheng and the others didn't collect all of them, so they didn't waste time on the small ones. They just picked medium and large factories to store them in. Because medium and large factories may have a lot of warehouse inventory. Like yesterday, I met a factory that made down jackets for export. Before the zombies came, they should have been rushing to make orders, so the warehouse was full of down jackets. Of course, Wei Ran didn't miss anything and took everything. Gu Ming parked the car at the gate of a factory. As soon as they walked inside, a thick, bloody smell hit them head-on. There were dark bloodstains everywhere, and even minced meat that had grown maggots. The smell is really bad. Even Mu Zicheng frowned. Zhang Nanfeng couldn't take it anymore, and said, "I'm about to be fainted by the smoke. There is no air circulation here, and the smell inside won't dissipate. I'm afraid it will produce poisonous gas, which will be harmful to the body." When Wei Ran takes things from the storage space outside, she will habitually grab them from the equipment bag so that even if others see it, they will only think that she is ready in the bag. When she took her hands out of the equipment bag, she added a few half-face breathing gas masks that only covered the nose and mouth, and they put them on one by one. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. Mu Zicheng asked Zhang Nanfeng to clean up the contaminated production equipment. Zhang Nanfeng immediately summoned a stream of high-pressure water to wash the equipment without any dust. After Mu Zicheng felt that there was no one around, she quickly put the device into the storage space. Half an hour later, when they stepped out of the gate of the factory, 3 teams of supernatural beings also came here. They came here chasing the high-level zombies that had escaped before. Chen Wei looked at the supernatural teams running ahead and asked in confusion, "There are so many people. Is it because there are high-level zombies here?" Mu Zicheng opened his consciousness to explore the vicinity and said lightly, "There's one nearby the if." Others suddenly sighed. Now the 3 of them can not only fight alone against groups of zombies, but also easily deal with high-level zombies alone. So zombies are already pediatrics for them. The ability team did not expect to meet someone here, and they looked like ordinary people, probably out of danger to find supplies. 2 of the team leaders were about to yell out angrily, but the handsome group leader on the left quickly stopped him with a smile. 2 team leaders, "Don't be angry. Isn't it that the prison is full of people and no longer accepts people? People have nowhere to go, and so there is probably nothing they can do. I don't think they got any supplies, so I'll just send them away." The 2 team leaders said impatiently, since team leader Su said so, "Then forget it." In the ability team, the team leader has higher rights than the team leader. This team leader doesn't seem to be too embarrassing for people looking for supplies like other team leaders or team leaders. The team leader walked a few steps towards Mu Zicheng and the others and said, "There is no food here, and now there are high-level zombies here, which is very dangerous. For the sake of safety, you should leave as soon as possible." Wei Ran noticed that the team leader was very nervous, young, only about 22 years old, but already able to be a team leader, probably the first batch of people who inspired supernatural powers. This kind of thing to talk to is usually Chen Wei. He took a step forward with a smile on his face. The end times are difficult. Thank you, Team Leader Su, for reminding us. We will leave right away. Mu Zicheng and his team are not interested in conflicting with members of the ability team, and they have to buy time to take in the remaining ones, equipment. The two team leaders also ignored Mu Zicheng and the others because of Team Leader Su's words, and led the supernatural team to continue hunting down high-level zombies. Mu Zicheng and his party boarded a business 7-seater car and sped away. They entered the last factory of considerable size. There was a smell too, but not the stench of rot, but fresh blood. Blood was sprayed everywhere in the factory building, and bright red stumps were still falling on the ground. Mu Zicheng and the others searched for the smell and continued to dig in. There was a blood stain on the floor of the factory restaurant. Following the blood stain, there was a body with only half of its body left in the pool of blood. Wei Ran knelt down to examine the protracted blood on the ground, and frowned slightly. Look at this fresh blood that hasn't solidified yet, and there is no one else here except those people from the supernatural team that I met before. The implication is, this remnant is a member of the ability team, or was killed not long ago. It's just that if dozens of supernatural beings can't deal with a high-level zombie, the coming alien will be a serious blow. Jiang Nanfeng sighed. This supernatural person is probably attacked by zombies only when he is alone. Mu Zicheng turned on the consciousness sensor search and found no zombies here but hundreds of meters away. He looked at the wrecked body indifferently, then slowly turned his dark eyes to look out of the window, and said quietly, "It will come back." Leader Su, it went to that factory. A team member with supernatural abilities went to the factory. Not far away is a large-scale factory. Leader Su followed the player's fingers and said, "Go and tell the other two leaders." Another team member came back at this time and reported urgently. Leader Su, Leader Lai and Leader Gao said that they have lost personnel, and they need to go back and send people first. Leader Su knew very well that this was not going back to send people, they just ran away. When the two of them saw high-level zombies just now, in order to be able to siege them successfully in exchange for rewards, they actually ignored the lives of the team members and let their team members swarm up to siege them without organizing strategies. As a result, they lost 3 supernatural beings. Leader Su gritted his teeth and scolded, "You trash who will bully the good and fear the evil. Then what should we do? There are only 7 or 8 of us, and we can't beat it." The team members were also afraid of high-level zombies and were unwilling to move forward. He frowned, thinking. The girl who was still in pain came to mind, and the rewards of high-level zombies included anti-inflammatory drugs and drugs. The sick girl can't wait. His heart sank. He stared at the factory in the distance and said to the team members, "You go back, I will go in by myself." Leader Su held his pistol tightly and stood on guard. Go in step by step. He knew that pistols couldn't deal with high-level zombies, but there was still no way. The ability team only issued this pistol to the level above the leader. He was also afraid in his heart. What he was afraid of was that if he confessed here, what would happen to his girl? As he gradually went deeper into the factory restaurant, he also smelled a strong smell of blood. There were blood stains on the ground, one after another. He saw a pair of feet shaking from behind the dining table. It seems to be the supernatural team member who was captured. Still alive? Chapter 28. When the alien came, team leader Su took a deep breath to stabilize his mood. He held the gun in one hand and held the wrist holding the gun tightly with the other hand. Walk slowly along the wall. Those feet gradually exposed from the calf behind the dining table to the thigh. Immediately after, a person in black clothes was lying on the ground sideways. His eyes were closed tightly, and his body was shaking. This coat vaguely seems to be worn by one of the 3 missing members. He walked over and lightly kicked the man's thigh. The man hummed vaguely, as if he had said something. He put the gun back in his back, took 2 steps closer, squatted down, and asked, "How are you? Which team are you from?" Suddenly, the man opened his eyes, gray pupils. It was that high-level zombie. It suddenly raised its hand, trying to grab Team Leader Sue, but Team Leader Sue disappeared at this moment. Then Team Leader Sue appeared in the middle of the factory restaurant, keeping a safe distance from it. This high-level zombie specially changed into the clothes of one of the supernatural beings and then lured him into approaching. If he didn't have this supernatural power, he would have suffered a long time ago. He shot immediately, but missed the vital part of the zombie, and the zombie walked towards him. Team Leader Sue made another tactic immediately and disappeared into the dining room. The zombie over there seemed to be thrown against the wall by some violent impact and fell to the ground. Half of its body was damaged. The zombie was motionless on the ground. He had to make sure that the zombies had been killed before he could exchange for rewarding supplies, and then he raised his gun and shot all the remaining bullets into the zombies. Just as he was about to walk out of the factory, he found that the red rope on his wrist was missing. He looked around eagerly and found that the red rope had fallen under the face of the zombie and was suppressed. He walked over and just bent down to pick up the red rope. The zombie suddenly bared its teeth ferociously at him and opened its mouth wide. It was too close to the zombies, and Team Leader Sue was unprepared this time. He was icy all over. He squeezed the red rope tightly in his hand, and the reflection in his pupils was like a zombie rushing towards him. Just when he thought he was about to confess, a gust of wind lifted him into the air and took him away from the attack range of the zombies. At the same time, he heard a few dull sounds like nails entering the wall. Only after he landed safely did he see the scene in front of him clearly. The zombie was nailed to the wall with 3 ice picks, and then there were several men in front of it watching and talking a few words from time to time. "Hey, this high-level zombie is much smarter than those we encountered before, and he knows how to play dead, yes I guess he used to be a senior management. Well, Chen Wei, if you are a zombie, you are better than him. Then it's natural." "Hey, no, Gu Ming, what do you mean?" "No," I said, Nanfeng, why don't you just kill it and nail it to the wall? What's the matter, you still want to paint? Isn't this just for your convenience? After nailing it, it will be convenient for you to burn it. Fuck off. Immediately after, a burst of flames was summoned, and the temperature rose sharply. After a while, everything returned to calm again. The wall was baked black by the fire, and there was nothing left. Leader Sue, who had just narrowly escaped death, was still in shock, and there were no high-level zombies left. The 3 of them turned around and looked at Team Leader Sue. Only then did he see clearly who these 3 were. It's them. I saw those people before. Their ability level is very high, even the captain can't compare to them. Boy, were you invisible just now? Your skill is interesting. Zhang Nanfeng walked to Team Leader Sue and patted him on the shoulder. Leader Sue regained his expression and replied, "I'm not invisibility, it's just the main speed and power assistance." He paused and asked, "Are you also here to hunt down this high-level zombie in exchange for rewards?" Although he didn't kill the zombies in the end, he also contributed, so he wanted to discuss with them whether they could distribute some supplies to him. Chen Wei smiled a few times, knowing what he was thinking, and said flickeringly, "Yes, they came after the zombies, but we don't want rewards, it's just to get experience points." Leader Sue's eyes lit up, and this don't worry. When they walked out of the factory, Team Leader Sue saw the front of their 7-person commercial vehicle again. Surprised by Team Leader Sue, he opened the door to reveal Mu Zicheng and Wei Ran sitting inside. "You guys still have cars after the apocalypse. There was a shortage of gasoline, and the remaining gasoline was also in the hands of the captain of the supernatural team." After the 3 of them got into the car one after another, Zhang Nanfeng pointed at the driver's cab in the front row and laughed a few times. "This car is a combination of gasoline and electricity. We have someone who can use electricity." He was again speechless in surprise. The electric energy vehicle in the team has long been shut down due to a power outage. There are people with electric abilities in the superpower team, but the power level is low, and they can barely be used to fight against zombies, and there is not much power to deal with other things. Wei Ran pursed her lips and smiled at Team Leader Su. Get in the car, we'll take you back. This place is quite far from the prison. When Wei Ran offered to send the other man back in front of him, Mu Zicheng pinched her cheeks with a black face and squeezed them into a small pout, turned to his eyes, and looked at her expressionlessly. Wei Ran stroked his hand, pinching his face, begging for mercy pitifully. Brother, am I repaying him for speaking for us just now? Brother just loves to bully me. The two immediately started distributing dog food again, if no one else was around. Leader Su hadn't gotten used to this situation yet, and was about to refuse out of embarrassment, when Chen Wei got out of the car and dragged him into the car without saying a word. Mainly because I just saw that he dared to take risks for the team members without knowing that he was a member of the zombie camouflage ability team, and he didn't just go straight ahead blindly, so I liked him a little bit more. And it was getting dark now, and the aliens would appear at any time, so it wouldn't hurt to send him back. On the way, Chen Wei asked Team Leader Su, who was sitting with him, brother, what's your name? Su Yi directly reported his name. I see that you seem to be nervous about the reward. Is it very generous? Chen Wei chatted without saying a word. Su Yi smiled wryly. There's no such thing as richness. All I care about is the little medicine in it. My girlfriend ran out of powers while besieging a group of zombies. She accidentally fell down the stairs and hit her head. She needs medical treatment. Wei Ran squinted her eyes and heard Su Yi's words, but she didn't say anything. Su Yi was a person who didn't know anything about them, and giving medicine rashly would cause huge trouble. Chen Wei just comforted Su Yi a few words and said nothing more. None of the three of them would casually confide in a stranger before, let alone in this apocalyptic world where they can only protect themselves. Everyone has a life. Just when they are about to go to the prison. Mu Zicheng's hand stroking Wei Ran froze slightly, and suddenly opened his half-drowned eyelids. His cold eyes turned to the car window. Jun Yi's face was full of sternness. Gu Ming, drive to the fastest speed. The three heard that Mu Zi accepted the serious meaning in the words. Gu Ming instantly accelerated the speed and drove forward. It's too far away from the villa, so I can't go back. He pondered in the dark, turned his eyes, and made a decision. Then he turned his head slightly to Su Yi, and said coldly, we're going in. As soon as Mu Zicheng said this, everyone knew that the most terrifying thing was coming, and there were many of them. Wei Ran also heard his latent meaning and stood up from his lap in surprise. Her eyes were gloomy, looking out of the car window at the darkness that was approaching night, and there was no sound. Although she had dealt with aliens in her previous life, these monsters were really terrifying. A few were easy to deal with, and a group of them could only be defended. Chapter 29. Aliens besiege the prison. Su Yi didn't know, so he thought it was impossible but go in. Boom. A loud noise interrupted Su Yi's words. Something heavy jumped on the roof was slightly sunken, and the whole body was bumped twice. Jiang Nanfeng said sharply, Gu Ming, get rid of it. Mu Zicheng held Wei Ran tightly in his arms to prevent her from hitting the car glass due to inertia. Gu Ming pulled up the handbrake, and with a drift and flick, the front and rear of the car were reversed, and the strange shape on the roof was thrown far away. At this time, the night was completely falling, and the light of the headlights illuminated the front. Su Yi saw a dozen or so 2-meter-high black monsters standing in the distance, illuminated by the headlights. Fear appeared in his eyes, and he blurted out, what kind of zombie is this? I've never seen it before. But no one answered him at this time. Then there was another inertial swing, and Gu Ming turned the car around again, and drove towards the prison at full speed. Turning a corner, I saw a door of the prison in the distance opened, and a car was being put into it. Seeing that the iron door was slowly closing again. At this critical moment, Gu Ming drove in quickly with the iron gate just wide enough for a car. The special iron gate of the prison was closed immediately. The two supernatural beings guarding the gate felt as if a shadow was galloping past them for a split second. Then the two of them saw a beautiful flick of a strange car parked firmly in the open space in front of the gate. They were stunned for a long time before they came back to their senses. They just wanted to step forward and ask why the people in the car broke into the supernatural team. Boom! Boom! followed by 2 violent knocks on the door. They turned back to the dense iron door in fright. And Mu Zicheng, who broke into the prison at this time. Do sounds of opening the door. Gu Ming and Jiang Nanfeng got out of the car first with sinister eyes, opened the rear compartment without panic, and took out the parts from the equipment bag, and assembled the gun quickly and nimbly. Hiss. The rear door of the 7-passenger commercial vehicle opened automatically. The stern Mu Zicheng and the gloomy Wei Ran got out of the car. Mu Zicheng walked straight to the iron gate with his long legs in a calm and unhurried manner, and did not stop in the rear compartment after passing by. Gu Ming immediately threw a laser gun, and he caught it firmly without squinting. He held the laser gun calmly, with the head of the gun pointing down casually, but walked quickly but steadily. Followed by Gu Ming and Chen Wei, who were also holding guns. There are 2 high sentry towers next to the iron gate, and you can see the situation outside by standing on them. The 2 supernatural beings guarding the gate didn't know what was going on outside the gate, and they saw these 3 men approaching fiercely with weapons. They hurried forward to stop them, but Chen Wei and Gu Ming pushed them away ferociously and impatiently. Mu Zicheng went straight up to the high sentry tower in 2s and 3s. Gu Ming and Chen Wei went to the other sentry tower and fired 2 strong luminous bombs into the sky. After firing, it would be like daytime within a certain range. They saw about 15 or so aliens, some were knocking on the iron gate, and some were trying to climb up outside the fence. If it hits like this again, the iron door will undoubtedly break. Suddenly a silver light appeared, forming a protective shield, shaking the strange shape of the iron gate 10 meters away. Mu Zicheng continued to switch fingers. Then an alien trying to climb the wall suddenly exploded into pieces. The 2 took this opportunity to set up their guns and started shooting the alien that hit the iron gate. The appearance of the alien is hard, and a single shot from the laser gun will only make them emit green smoke. You have to keep attacking its vital points, the head and heart, to shoot through them. Gu Ming pinched his fingers and summoned a rolling thunder, splitting an alien within his guarding range that was about to collapse into the wall into carbon in an instant. Suyi stared dumbfounded as they didn't say a word from the beginning to the end, but they cooperated with each other extremely tacitly. There was so much commotion here there was no need for anyone to report it, and Chen Shuxian ran out with the members of the ability team. They had just left the open space, and they were still a group of confused people. Suddenly, an alien jumped down from the wall behind and roared. Chen Shuxian was startled to see this ferocious and terrifying black monster, and his hair stood on end. Aliens are not like zombies, they are quick and cunning. Just like at this moment, it bounced and easily held down a superhuman who attacked it, tore it apart, and then swallowed it. Chen Shuxian was forcibly pulled back to his sanity by the bloody scene in front of him. The bell in his heart rang loudly. Foreign objects invaded. Give the order to start the generator, turn on the lights, and all the supernatural beings in the supernatural team will come out to join the battle. But the members of the ability team have never faced the alien, and their random attacks did not cause the alien to suffer any damage. The alien was completely enraged and opened its mouth wide to expose the bloody gums. It ran up to a supernatural being, raised its sharp black claws and slapped the supernatural being from the head. Spread blood and mud. The members of the current team of supernatural beings are simply hitting a stone with a pebble to the alien. When it was about to attack other people, it was shot several times in the head by a laser gun, and finally some black blood flowed out, and it stopped moving. Attack its head and heart. Wei Ran yelled at the other supernatural beings. Seeing that Wei Ran's attack was effective, the supernatural person listened to her words and attacked the vital point. Chen Shuxian didn't expect that Wei Ran was still alive, and his face was full of surprises. Zhao Ran. Wei Ran didn't expect to see Chen Shuxian here, and his eyes were filled with disgust. Although she basically knew what happened in the previous life, she was not very clear about the situation at the beginning of the end of the world, and before the establishment of the social system, so she didn't know that the captain of the supernatural team was Chen Shuxian. Chen Shuxian shouted again, Zhao Ran, be careful. At this time, the lights in the open space illuminated the entire area. The alien slowly turned to Wei Ran and roared at her a few times. The bloody mouth was full of sharp teeth, and he could vaguely see the remnant limbs that could be hung on it, and rushed towards her quickly. Wei Ran calmly mounted the gun and kept shooting, but because the alien was too fast, the attack could not hit the vital point. It quickly bounced a few times and was about to swoop down from above Wei Ran. At this time, Su Yi's Ju activated and teleported to Wei Ran's side, pulling her away from the alien at a safe distance in an instant. At the same time, Jiang Nanfeng rushed to summon ice swords, and dozens of sharp ice swords as thick as wooden stakes appeared and flew towards the alien's vitals, forcing it back. Su Yi saw that Wei Ran had no supernatural powers, so he wanted to stand in front of her, but Wei Ran pushed him away with a cold face. She took a laser gun at a distance and aimed at its head to make a hole, and then she took out a laser grenade from the equipment bag to be safe, and threw it into the hole accurately. Get down, she put her hands on the hood of a car next to her, leaped over the car neatly, put her head in her hands, bent her body and hid behind the car. Everyone present saw Wei Ran throwing a grenade go to the alien and immediately get down to reduce the damage. Boom! The explosion sounded. Su Yi stood up after the impact of the explosion and saw that the alien had been blown into a pool of blood and flesh. He looked at the weak Wei Ran in disbelief, but at this moment there were only two words in his mind: tough. Jiang Yanfeng walked over quickly and told Wei Ran that Mu Zicheng asked the group of aliens to get a bag of meat to taste. Wei Ran understood immediately. She ran back to the back compartment of the 7-person business car, took a bag and reached out to fish it out. She took out a large piece of meat, followed by a large pile of meat, and then quickly took out a big bag to put the meat in. It is good. And Jiang Nanfeng put 10 laser grenades into the bag of meat, and took out 2 time delay bombs, but this time he encountered difficulties. How to send the bomb there? Although this bomb is not as powerful as a grenade, but with so many bombs added together, if it is too close to the prison, the impact force will definitely break through the iron gate. And Mu Zicheng stayed here to defend the iron gate, and couldn't leave a step. Jiang Nanfeng thought for a while, frowned, his eyes drifted past Su Yi by accident, suddenly thought of something, and then turned back to stare at Su Yi. Seeing Jiang Nanfeng staring straight at him, Su Yi's scalp became numb. What? What's wrong? Chapter 30. Jiang Nan. Feng didn't have time to talk nonsense to him, so he directly confirmed it. I remember you said that you have the speed ability and can teleport, right? Su Yi nodded ignorantly. Jiang Nanfeng immediately took the big bag of meat, pulled Su Yi's arm and told him clearly as he walked towards the iron gate, there are 10 laser grenades and 2 time delay bombs in this bag of meat, which are enough to get rid of these aliens. But you can't put the bomb too close here, now only you can do it. Move quickly and place it in the distance and lure the aliens to pass, and when they are approaching, you can quickly move back. Jiang Nanfeng pulled Su Yi to the iron gate, looked at Su Yi and said, we will take care of you, cover you, and never let anything happen to you. Don't you want medicine? I'll give it to you. I'll give you the medicine, already made Su Yi unable to refuse. He really needs medicine. Su Yi nodded in agreement without hesitation. Although they didn't know each other at all, Su Yi felt that these people could be trusted. Jiang Nanfeng activated the delay bomb and warned Su Yi that it would explode in 3 minutes, so he had to throw the bomb back before that. Su Yi resolutely took the hundreds of caddies of meat, because his support was strength, so he used his skills to take the 100 caddies of meat with ease. Jiang Nanfeng went to the high watchtower to watch Gu Ming give the signal to open the door and go out. After Gu Ming fired 2 luminous bombs again, Gu Ming made a gesture of yes to him after a while. Jiang Nanfeng patted Su Yi's arm, gave him a laser gun, and said with firm eyes, don't worry, you can definitely come back. Su Yi took a deep breath to calm his mind. The iron gate slowly opened so that only one person could pass through, and Su Yi immediately left from Jiang Nanfeng's eyes. He didn't move to the distance quickly, but drove the laser gun at a short distance to attract the attention of the aliens. After several times, the angry aliens followed Su Yi. At this time, Su Yi was already far away from the prison, so he put down the bag of meat. Just when I wanted to go back, I realized that I had forgotten that the industrial park had already consumed my powers today, and it was also spent saving Wei Ran just now. Now the powers are not enough to support him to go back. He suddenly looked at the hideous and terrifying alien that was about to approach, and the time for the delay bomb was almost up. At this critical moment of life and death, Su Yi felt as if someone grabbed his collar and lifted him up into the air. The extremely fast wind made Su Yi unable to open his eyes, and the strong wind hit his face with stinging pain, but it only took a second at most before the wind stopped. The collar at the back of his neck was loosened, and Su Yi, who had no support, staggered back, and someone grabbed his arm to stabilize him. He opened his eyes, and what came into his eyes was a tall, slender and cold figure exuding a cold and forceful aura. The person behind him supporting him was Jiang Nanfeng, who was staring at the front. He followed Jiang Nanfeng's line of sight, and saw a group of aliens scrambling for the bag of meat in the distance, only to realize that he was already on the high sentry tower at this moment. Brother Cheng. There are 7 or 8 aliens who want to come back, and there are still a group of aliens coming over there. Chen Wei, on the other side, changed his face and shouted at Mu Zicheng. Wei Ran, who was standing next to Mu Zicheng, also saw another group of aliens in the distance. She frowned and took a step forward unconsciously, clutching the half-waist high railing in front of her. This amount is too much. At this moment, the ground shook slightly to violently, as if something was about to burst from the ground. Wei Ran held onto the railing tightly to try to stand still. What happened? What is going to come out of the ground? When everyone is panicking, is there something more terrifying? Wei Ran hurriedly turned her head to look at what Mu Zicheng was about to say, but saw Mu Zicheng's eyes were stern, his thin lips were tightly pursed, and his hands were pinching the complicated formula for summoning advanced skills. Suddenly, the ground in front of the 7 or 8 aliens running back broke through several huge glaciers, blocking their way. They wanted to go around again, but then glaciers appeared all around them, firmly besieging all the aliens within the explosion range. This is an advanced skill of the ice ability. The rise of the glacier. Gu Ming and the others were surprised to see the towering icebergs, thinking it was Jiang Nanfeng, but saw that Jiang Nanfeng was also shocked by the scene in front of him, and there was no trick in his hands. He passed Jiang Nanfeng again and looked at Mu Zicheng. Both of them said in amazement, "Brother Cheng." Shuxian and everyone in the prison stared at the shocking scene in front of them with dumbfounded eyes. When he heard that Gu Ming and the others were called Mu Zicheng, he subconsciously followed them. At first glance, he was completely shocked. It was Mu Zicheng. How is this possible? He will have such a high rank. At this time, Wei Ran's eager cry came from the high watchtower. "Brother, quickly withdraw your powers." Just as another group of aliens rushed over from a distance. Boom, boom, boom. There were several loud explosions. At this critical moment, the long 3-minute delay has finally arrived. Gu Ming remotely fired a luminous bomb over there. I saw that the glacier in front had been blown to pieces, and the ice surface was stained with black blood and blackened flesh. This super-intensive explosion not only blasted the aliens trapped in the glacier into minced meat, but also killed a few of the other group passing by. The rest of the aliens seemed to smell danger, and then turned around and retreated slowly, disappearing into the night. Go, go, they go. All the people cheered. Wei Ran cried and hugged the pale Mu Zicheng. And Mu Zicheng endured the turmoil of QI and blood caused by the chaos of his internal breath, and the dull pain like being hit by a sledgehammer weighing hundreds of caddies, slightly raised his pale thin lips, and gently comforted her. "Why are you crying?" I'm fine." Mu Zicheng used his powers to maintain the firmness of the strengthened glacier until the explosion, and the sudden interruption of the powerful power call would cause damage to the summoner. The protective shield summoned when the grenade exploded before was a defense, so even the center of the explosion would be unscathed, as long as the summoner was strong enough. Jiang Nanfeng knew something was wrong when Wei Ran yelled that sentence. He immediately stepped forward to support Mu Zicheng, put his arm on his shoulder, and led Mu Zicheng down the high sentry tower. Gu Ming and Chen Wei on the other side also heard Wei Ran's shout before the explosion, and immediately saw that something was wrong. When they came to Wei Ran, they saw that Mu Zicheng's face was pale, which was almost unprecedented, and the three of them rushed to Sensu. Gu Ming looked at Wei Ran nervously and asked, "Brother Cheng, what's going on?" Mu Zicheng coughed twice, swallowed the bloody smell in his throat, and said slowly, "It's okay, just rest." Wei Ran weeping and choking, Mu Zicheng wiped away the cold sweat that was constantly breaking out due to the pain. "Why is it all right? I used supernatural powers to maintain the glacier's siege of the alien, and I was injured internally by the high-intensity explosion. The specific injury I have to check to find out." At this time, Su Wei, who had been by the side, suggested aloud, "Why don't you just rest and check at my place?" The three of them looked at Wei Ran. After all, she only knew how to check. Whether to go back to the villa or stay here is up to Wei Ran to decide. But Wei Ran decided to stay here without even thinking about it. Although this is Cheng Shuxian's supernatural team, nothing is as important as Mu Zicheng. What's more, the situation is unknown now. The alien may still be waiting in the distance. The night is too dangerous. A group of people got into the car, and when Wei Ran was about to get in, Xiao Ran Cheng Shuxian called her to stop. But Wei Ran didn't pay any attention, and just got in the car and left. Cheng Shuxian's face was gloomy, and he clenched his fists tightly. Chapter 31. Stay in the prison to recuperate temporarily. Because Su Yi is the leader of the supernatural team, he has higher authority than the group leader, so he was allocated a former prison guard's dormitory, with 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, and 1 bathroom. Under Su Yi's leadership, Gu Ming and the others helped Mu Zicheng into one of the rooms. Su Yi saw that the equipment bags of Gu Ming and the others were thrown in the car at this time, and their hands were empty. Only Wei Ran was carrying an equipment bag, and the expressions of the three were stern and nervous, thinking that their medicines were not enough. Jiang Nanfeng said he would give him the medicine he needed, and Mu Zicheng rescued him back to the prison. Huahua flashed through his mind, and he remembered the little medicine left at home. Although his girl is also waiting for the medicine, but now that Mu Zicheng is in a hurry, Su Yi said ruthlessly, "I still have a little medicine here, I don't know if it's suitable." There are also people with healing abilities in the superpower team. Therapist. After putting Mu Zicheng on the bed, Chen Wei stood up and patted Su Yi on the shoulder, saying, "I'm interested." No need for the therapist. Then he turned to Wei Ran. "We are guarding outside." After speaking, they quickly walked out of the room with a dazed Su Yi in their arms and closed the door, so that Wei Ran could take the medicine out of the space for treatment without distraction. Wei Ran immediately inspected Mu Zicheng carefully with small and portable inspection equipment. Fortunately, Aunt Jing specially adjusted Mu Zicheng's physique at that time, so Mu Zicheng's physical endurance was different from ordinary people, so he didn't hurt his internal organs. It is because the summoning high-power skill was suddenly interrupted, coupled with the strong impact of the explosion. The superposition of these two caused a sharp reversal of QI and blood, causing Mu Zicheng's thick and steady inner breath to rush around in his body immediately, so he felt a dull pain. This is also a type of internal injury, and it can be recovered after a day or 2 of recuperation. Although Wei Ran was relieved, her tense complexion finally improved a bit, and now she was sitting beside him silently mixing the potion. Her tears were still falling like pearls with a broken thread. Mu Zicheng stretched out his hand to caress the little face that was still crying, looked at the flush in her eyes, and said softly, "My eyes are swollen from crying." Wei Ran didn't pay attention to him, but silently mixed the medicine for treating internal injuries with other targeted auxiliary medicines to make an efficient and quick recovery medicine for internal injuries, then pulled the medicine into the syringe, squeezed out the air in the syringe, and slowly inject into Mu Zicheng's vein. Before the potion was finished, Mu Zicheng already felt much better in pain, and his complexion returned to some color immediately. After the injection, Wei Ran just wanted to get up. Mu Zicheng grabbed her hand suddenly and pulled her down on his warm chest. Wei Ran exclaimed, struggling slightly to get up without daring to make a big move. "Your internal injury is still not healed." Mu Zicheng held her down and laughed a few times as Ran finally willing to talk to me. Wei Ran stopped struggling when she heard his words. Just thinking of his pale face without a trace of blood just now, the image of him before his death in the previous life flashed before Wei Ran's eyes, and his body trembled slightly in fear. Mu Zicheng knew that she was really frightened, so the hand that was lightly pressing the back of her neck quickly changed to hug her tightly. Soft words whispered in her ear, "My Ran, don't be afraid. I am here, my brother is here." She lightly hammered a few of his shoulders with her pink fist, and cursed with a choked voice, "Mu Zicheng, you are a villain, you scared me to death. You can't do this in the future." Mu Zicheng stroked her back, followed her words, and murmured softly, "It's my brother's fault. I won't do it in the future, okay? Don't cry." Then he whispered some love words in her ear. Lying on his hard and warm chest, listening to the strong heartbeat, and listening to his soft whispers, Wei Ran finally calmed down. After a while, Wei Ran suddenly got up from Mu Zicheng's arms, and Mu Zicheng also got up on a half support to see what was wrong with her, and saw the following scene. 20 bottles of energy recovery water, 10 red fruits, and various medicines to treat internal injuries, regulate internal breath, and restore body functions filled half the bed. He saw that Wei Ran was still trying to take it to the space, as if not covering the bed with an air of swearing. Mu Zicheng hurriedly stopped her so that Wei Ran stopped her. Although Wei Ran withdrew her hand, she still pointed to the object that occupied half of the bed, blinked her clear eyes and looked at Mu Zicheng, insisting that he eat it all. Mu Zicheng quietly looked at the pile of medicines on the bed for a while. His scalp became numb. Then he looked at Wei Ran and tried to discuss Ran this. But he didn't start talking, and then he watched her deflate. His mouth and eyes were about to fill with tears again. How could Mu Zicheng dare to say anything? He could only sweep everything without saying a word. Wei Ran burst into tears and laughed. Mu Zicheng was fine after being forced to operate by Wei Ran, but it was an internal injury after all, and it would be very easy to leave a sick person if he didn't rest and recuperate. At this time they gathered in the living room to discuss matters. Wei Ran stretched out his hand to close his coat for Mu Zicheng, who was beside him, and said to him, "Brother, you can't use your powers frequently these 2 days, you need to rest for 2 days." Mu Zicheng patted her soft hand lightly. Chen Wei thought for a while, and asked then, "Are we temporarily staying in the prison these 2 days?" Mu Zicheng pondered. Although the aliens have retreated from the prison, there are still many around, but they are well concealed. The team can start the engine and turn on the power grid here, so it is still safe here. We will go out from here in 2 days and go home. Gu Ming and the three expressed their absolute agreement. Su Yu stood in front of the window, thoughtful. Suddenly, a male voice from behind brought him back to his senses. Turning around, he saw Chen Wei behind him. Chen Wei discussed with him with a smile, "Su Yi, we will be inseparable for a while. Can I stay with you for 2 days? We can exchange supplies for the accommodation fee." Su Yi waved his hands again and again. "No accommodation fee. There are only 2 of me, and the supplies I receive every month are enough to survive, and you can live here. There is still food in the kitchen. Are you hungry? I can make some, but only rice and sweet potatoes and the like." Chen Wei was taken aback. According to Su Yi's ability to fulfill the duties of the team leader, he would never be a brave and foolish person. Just looking at the sophistication he treated the other 2 team leaders in the industrial park that day, and when high-level zombies disguised themselves as team members, he was also prepared up to see the clothes, cars, and equipment of their group. It is impossible for him not to know that the group of people sitting in the living room are fat people. He remembered that when he was in the industrial park, Su Yi almost threw his life away because of that reward. Chen Wei smiled immediately, his eyes flashed, and he patted his arm. "Thanks, I will trouble you." Su Yi cooked a pot of white porridge and steamed some sweet potatoes. After everyone ate, Mu Zicheng and Wei Ran went back to the previous room to rest, while Chen Wei and the other 3 settled down in the living room and rested separately. Chapter 32. Listening to the arrangement of the little ancestor. Early in the morning, Chen Wei took a piece of meat into the kitchen and cooked a pot of tender meat porridge full of fragrance. In order to avoid suspicion, there is no fried side dishes. While they were eating in the living room, the iron door of the dormitory opened. Su Yi Hai, who just came back from the office where he received the reward, was in a gloomy mood. He smelled the long-lost smell of meat and stared blankly at the few people who were eating porridge around a simple table in the living room. Jiang Nanfeng said hello and pointed to the vacant seat next to him. Su Yi, come here quickly, the time is just right and it's fresh out of the oven. Su Yi remembered that they used hundreds of caddies of meat to lure the aliens yesterday. Maybe it was left in the car. There are some, and it is not easy to spoil food in winter now. Since the end of the world, meat has been extremely rare, and it is only available as high-level rewards. He was not hypocritical, so he sat down too. A mouthful of hot porridge drove back the winter chill on my body, and the full meat lifted people up a bit. Wei Ran noticed that after he sat down he put the hot porridge in another clean bowl and put it aside to cool. This should be for his girlfriend. I haven't seen his girlfriend since last night, and there are some empty medicine boxes left in the living room. Wei Ran guessed that his girlfriend was either in a coma or with limited mobility. Jiang Nanfeng stirred the porridge in the bowl and asked him casually, Su Yi, I see that you are the only one who takes care of your girlfriend. Where are you and your girlfriend's family? Su Yi stopped holding the chopsticks slightly, his eyes were gloomy, and he said in a low voice, run away, who knows whether it's dead or alive, anyway, he's not the same person. Jiang Nanfeng glanced at Chen Wei and Chen Wei returned the wink. After Su Yi finished eating, the temperature of the porridge in another bowl was just right. He took the bowl and entered the closed door. When the door was about to close again, Wei Ran heard a faint young female voice. Mu Zicheng saw Wei Ran bored in the dormitory, so he took her around the prison. Wei Ran looked at Mu Zicheng, who was pulling her forward, and looked at the people coming and going in front of the iron doors and windows everywhere, and couldn't help laughing. When Mu Zicheng heard the movement of the little thing behind him, he stopped immediately, and turned towards her. Wan Yi raised his eyebrows sideways. What are you laughing at? Wei Ran pursed her lips and smiled, and stepped forward to hug her his strong forearm. Everyone used to stay away from this place, but today we are leisurely strolling in the prison. This place used to restrict freedom, but it is still restricted by all kinds of apocalyptic conditions. But it has become a place where many people are willing to come in, even if they squeeze their heads. In order to save life, it is actually a kind of coldness to say it. The corners of Mu Zicheng's mouth turned up when he was teased by her words, and he pinched her nose pamperingly. Then I'll take you around a few more times, so that you can relax. Wei Ran smiled and nodded emphatically. After walking around for most of the time, I found that this place is like a small fiefdom. The supernatural captain is the king, and all the supplies are distributed by him. The subordinates, no matter the supernatural or ordinary people, have to obey him. Only the higher the authority, the better the supplies. Mu Zicheng and Wei Ran walked to the open space from last night again. The bloody mess from last night had been cleaned up, as if nothing had happened. Wei Ran thought of meeting Chen Wei here last night, but Mu Zicheng was not surprised. She raised her head to Mu Zicheng. Brother, did you know that the supernatural captain is from the Cheng family? Mu Zicheng raised his hand over her slender shoulder, rested on her shoulder, and wrapped his arms inside. He then nodded. He established the supernatural team in order to manipulate supernatural beings for his use. Now that he knows that Wei Ran is the only one in his heart, he can calmly talk about Chen Wei, who is not mentioned. On the other hand, Wei Ran hated everything about Chen Wei, including this, and she said viciously, brother, you can rest up and we will leave immediately. Mu Zicheng looked at her cold face with black eyes and embraced her tight. She said softly, okay. I will follow the arrangement of my little ancestor. Wei Ran punched him and smiled angrily. I hate. After turning around twice, Wei Ran strongly felt that Mu Zicheng was still recuperating. I was tired during the middle school, so I went back to the dormitory. It happened that Jiang Nanfeng, Gu Ming and Chen Wei also went out for a stroll and came back. Mu Zicheng knew something was wrong by looking at their expressions. Wei Ran didn't allow Mu Zi to use his powers, so in order to be able to talk properly, the five of them stood in an open space. Gu Ming lowered his voice and said to Mu Zicheng, the gun Su Yi used in the industrial park was familiar to me, but later I remembered that it was an ordinary pistol commonly used in the county team. The guns here are distributed uniformly, with high authority you can pick them up, but you have to return them when you return from the task. I just walked along the most heavily guarded area and took advantage of the slack to go in and explore. Inside is the ammunition depot, and the cars and boxes inside are all the signs of the county team. Wei Ran thought of. Sheng Wanling looked at Mu Zicheng and said in a low voice, then Sheng Wanling still didn't go back in time. Mu Zicheng replied in a low voice, yes, he brought everyone back 3 days later guarding most of the ammunition and supplies. He pondered for a moment and then said, but I didn't know that there were members of the Chung family in the county team. Mu Zicheng didn't know everything, his consciousness sensed it is not always turned on. That is impossible. Sensing requires a search point to sense, otherwise there are so many people and so many things in the world to be filtered one by one, it would consume too much power. Then Chen Wei said in a lower voice, then do you want to blow up his ammunition depot? Mu Zicheng glanced at Wei Ran. Although Wei Ran wanted to do this very much, but she couldn't completely deal with the aliens with supernatural powers, and she had to combine them with weapons. Cheng Shuxian is not the only one here, there are so many lives relying on the ammunition depot to live. She can't do this. She took a deep breath and shook her head slowly. Mu Zicheng knew what she was thinking about, so he turned his eyes to Chen Wei. Listened to her. Chen Wei nodded and continued to whisper, okay, I understand. Jiang Nanfeng remained silent all this time, and finally couldn't hold back his anger at this moment. Right, I told you, why do you speak in such a low voice? He raised one hand and turned around a few times, laughing angrily. This is a football field. We are in the middle of the football field, except Brother Cheng who can still use this ability. Be normal, okay? These people looked around and there was indeed no one there, only the cold wind. They returned to the dormitory after arguing. Su Yui was sitting gloomy in the living room. There was a bag of rice on the table, but nothing else. Chen Wei noticed that it was wrong. He went out to inquire today and found out that the day to receive the supplies is not today, so this should be a reward, but isn't it said that there are medicines? So he asked Su Yui, have you distributed supplies in your ability team? Su Yi numbly shook his head. This is a reward from the high-level zombie in the industrial park, saying that it was because I brought the alien to the ability team. Most of the rewards will be deducted for the loss caused by the loss. Chen Wei and the others knew what was deducted, and it was the life-saving medicine that Su Yi wanted to take even if he wanted to die. This supernatural team is really strict, and they can make any bad excuses, Jiang Nanfeng sarcastically said.